Just believe yourself. Don't give up. 자, 코로나 바이러스가 꽤 오랜 시간 동안 걸쳐간다는 거에 대해서 생각해 보신 적이 있습니까? 우리는 그런 얘기는 상상도 하기 싫었고 매일 이렇게 물었습니다. 이거 언제 끝나? 여름 되면 끝나? 백신 맞으면 끝나? 몇 퍼센트 맞으면 끝난데 참 우리가 코로나 바이러스에 알고 있는 건 정말 옆집에서 들은 얘기, 어떤 유튜브에서 들은 얘기 너무나 조각인 것 같아요. 근데 그렇게 조각으로 상대하기에 코로나는 너무 큰 거 아닌가요? 우리 인생에 미친 영향이 얼마나 커요? 그래서 요즘 같은 때 가장 필요한 게 제대로 연구해서 이걸 우리에게 좀 잘 들려줄 수 있을 만한 사람이 좋겠다라는 생각을 꽤 오랫동안 하고 있었습니다. 닥터 니콜라스 크리스타키스, 이분은 의사이자 사회학자고 예일대에서 생물학을 하시고 하버드 의대에서 공중보건학 하시고 펜실바니아에서 사회학 하시고 세상에 통섭평학자라고 하는 분입니다. 지금 현재 예일대 교수신데요. 이 책을 썼습니다. 신의 화살이라고 번역된 이 책입니다. 이 책 읽으면서 너무너무 후회했어요. 지난 2년 동안 코로나로 인해 그렇게 고통받으면서 왜 우리는 코로나에 대해서 제대로 된 책 한 권 읽지 않았을까? 어째 이렇게 그냥 내 인생을 송두리째 바꾸는 이 사건을 이렇게 허술하게 됐지? 막 이런 후회를 진짜 제가 많이 했거든요. 근데 이 책을 읽으면서 많은 의문들이 풀렸습니다. 코로나가 그냥 딱 종식되고 훅 사라지고 이러는 게 아니라 한번 전 세계를 휩쓸은 코로나는 내 인생에 5, 6년 동안 문제를 주고 풀어야 되는 숙제로 남아있구나. 이걸 천천히 차근차근 풀어가야 되겠다. 코로나와 나와의 관계를 보고 롱텀에서 이걸 해결해 나갈 수 있는 방법을 스스로 찾고 해야 되겠습니다. 이거 아무도 대신 안 풀어줘요. 여러분의 숙제입니다. 그 숙제를 풀기 위해서 꼭 한 권의 책을 여러분에게 추천한다면 바로 신의 화살입니다. Very nice to meet you. I'm NK Kim. Hello, Dr. Christakis. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
It's a real treat to have you give a lecture on my show.
Talk a little bit about the pandemic and
Okay.
then and the book. So, I mean, I think what I'd like to say is that we happen to be alive at a once in a century event, and something very unusual is happening. There is what is known as an ecological release of a new pathogen. A new germ has been introduced into our midst, and it's now going to circulate among us forever. It's like, when there's an island in the Pacific, and a boat arrives and releases rats onto the island, and the rats overrun the place and devastate it. This is what the virus is doing to us. Our bodies are the island to the virus, which is like the rat. And so we have no natural immunity to the virus, and it's just going to spread among us and do what all living things do, which is, gain its own advantage. It's quite a bad pathogen. It's R0, that is to say, its spreadability, how infectious this germ is about 3 for the original strain that emerged in Wuhan. And that means for each case, you get 3 new cases. That's a measure of how able the virus is to propagate and spread itself. So for each case of the virus in the natural state, we now know that this virus kills about 1% of the people that it infects. Now, this virus has some other worrisome properties that most people know about right now. It has asymptomatic transmission, can spread even when people don't have symptoms. And this is different than the SARS-1 epidemic, from over 10 years ago that devastated many countries in Asia, because that virus, typically the person had symptoms before they could give it to other people.
Yeah, right.
And that made it much easier to control the virus because we knew where it was.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. That's right.
Certain other features that this virus has. For example, this virus, SARS-CoV-2, has what is known as protean manifestations. That is to say, it causes a very wide range of illness, from no symptoms to mild symptoms to symptoms in different parts of the body, gastrointestinal symptoms, neurological symptoms, pulmonary symptoms, to more serious symptoms, to death. And the problem is that this wide range of symptoms, unlike SARS-1, this wide range of symptoms has made it difficult for us to confront the virus because, first of all, people can't be sure what they have. Maybe they just have the sniffles, they just have the flu. And second, many people trivialize the virus. Let me give you an example of that. Imagine you have two worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And in world A, you have 1,000 people,
Okay.
and 10 of them get seriously ill with the
Yeah.
virus,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them dies.
Okay.
So the infection fatality rate, 10 people got sick, one died. It looks like 10% of the people who get the virus die. And that
Okay.
seems pretty serious.
Yeah. Very
Now imagine
serious.
the second world,
Okay.
Again 1,000 people, 10 of them get seriously ill,
Mm-hmm.
one of them dies, but also 90 people get a mild illness. So 100 people got sick, one of them dies, it looks like 1% of the people die.
Okay.
You might naively feel that world B is the better world to be in. So 1% of the people who got sick died in world B, that's the better world to be in. But that's false. It's clearly worse to be in world B. Because in world A, 10 people got seriously ill and one died. In world B, 10% got seriously ill and one died. And also 90 people got a mild illness. So the virus is sneaky. It deludes us. It deludes us into thinking that we are in a mild world because it also causes so many mild illnesses. And this makes us not realize the severity of the problem. So it has a variety of properties, this virus does, that makes it sneaky. I began tracking this virus in January of 2020 in collaboration with some Chinese colleagues of mine. We had data on mobility, phone mobility data in China, using cell phones to track people's movements, and we had information on 11 million people transiting through Wuhan in January of 2020 and spreading out throughout the rest of China. And just with the movement of people alone, we were able to forecast the intensity, location, and timing of the pandemic throughout China through the end of February. So very early on, I was very worried about this virus and, convinced that it was going to be a pandemic disease. This way that we have come to live right now with the COVID-19 pandemic may feel very alien and unnatural to many people.
Right.
But it is actually neither of those things. Plagues are a feature of the human experience. Plagues are in the Bible that we have in the Western canon, from 3,000 years ago. Homer's Iliad, begins with a plague. They're in Shakespeare, they're in Cervantes, they're in literary traditions around the world. I'm sure in Korea as well, there are ancient stories that describe devastating plagues. So what happened in 2020 was not new to our species. And plagues require collective action and often state power to confront. You cannot fight an invading army on your own. You need some collective, state-organized confrontation of certain kinds of threats. And this type of a threat, the plague, is that kind of a threat. Furthermore, many people think that what we are doing in response to the germ is collapsing our economy. But this is false. It's not what we're doing in response to the germ that's collapsing our economy. It's the virus itself that's collapsing our economy. In fact, Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary, and David Cutler, a former colleague of mine from Harvard, they published a paper about a year ago now assessing the financial cost of the virus to the United States. And they called it the $16 trillion virus. $8 trillion in economic damage to the United States, and $8 trillion in health damage from death, disability, and illness. This is an economic shock that's bigger than the Great Depression. It is a devastating impact of the virus itself. And it's important to realize that many of the things that are happening in Korea and in the United States in response to the virus, this physical distancing that we're staying away from each other, this economic collapse, this slowing down, are all features of plagues. And plagues are also feature a number of other psychological responses. In other words, thousands of years ago, we have accounts of during times of plague, people get superstitious.
Right.
Or leaders lie. Leaders lie to the people. They say, oh, nothing is happening, never mind. This has been described for thousands of years, and yet in the United States, we saw the same exact thing. We saw, the President of the United States was lying to the people, was telling them, nothing is happening, don't worry, or people were saying, use these medications that don't work. So these superstitious beliefs about how to treat the disease and lying about what's happening are very typical and very common.
It happened a lot in many countries, right?
Yes, of course. In many countries and for thousands of years, this is typical because people don't want to believe, what is happening.
Right.
And in fact, denial is such a constant feature of epidemics in the past few thousand years that we might even think of denial.
Okay, denial.
And we have seen that in this epidemic, misinformation spreading on the internet very, very rapidly. And in fact, you can even think, okay, you have a network of people and the germ is spreading from person to person to person to person. And on the same network, information is spreading. For example, information about whether to wear a mask or whether to be vaccinated, or false information maybe about medicines that don't work, that people are trying. So you can think about these two processes, the spread of germs
And spread.
and the spread of information, as dueling contagions. They're competing with each other. What's going to win? Is the germ going to spread faster than the truth, or will lies spread faster than the germ?
So what is more dangerous then? Spread germ is dangerous or wrong information is dangerous?
Yes, exactly. As everyone is aware, of course, we have invented vaccines now to use against the virus. And we are the first generation of human beings alive that has been able to confront this ancient threat of plagues in real time by inventing a specific countermeasure.
Okay.
So our ancestors thought they could do things to stop the plague. Maybe they could pray, or in medieval Europe, when the bubonic plague was striking medieval Europe, they thought if you take snakes, and if you cut up the snake and mince the snake, and onions, and you mince the onions, and you make a paste of snake and onions, and smear it on your body, this would stop the plague. Of course, it didn't. So our ancestors thought they could do things that would stop the plague, but they couldn't. We can actually do things that stop the plague. We have, vaccines that we've invented, and that's, for thousands of years, plagues have been afflicting humans, but we have vaccines which we've invented, which actually work, and that is a big difference from ancient times. Now, people may want to understand if the vaccines are available and if they work, why do we still need to wear masks? Or why do we still, need to have gathering bans? And it's not just because of the Delta variant, although the new variants are causing problems. The way you need to think about this is something called the Swiss cheese model. So Swiss cheese is a kind of cheese that has holes in it.
Okay.
And you can have slices of Swiss cheese. You have to think about our defense against the virus as being layers of Swiss cheese.
Okay.
So one layer, each layer is good. Layers.
Okay, layers. Okay.
Layers of Swiss cheese, one after the other.
Okay.
Like this.
Okay.
And each layer is good, but it has some holes in it. It has some imperfections.
Okay. It's a hole.
So, for example, here's a layer of Swiss cheese, and the virus is coming, And if it hits the flat part, it bounces back. Yes, exactly. But if it
Okay.
hits a hole, it goes through.
Ah,
So if it happens in all, so one layer is masking, wearing masks.
this is
So that's-
masking.
Yeah, good but not perfect.
Okay.
And another layer is quarantine.
Quarantine.
Good but not perfect.
Okay.
And another layer is testing. Testing is good but not perfect.
Oh.
And another layer is closing schools. Closing schools is good to stop the virus but not perfect.
Okay.
Each layer is effective, but no layer is 100% effective at stopping the virus. So what you need to understand is that you need multiple layers of defense. Because if the holes are located at random in the pieces of Swiss cheese, after you stack 2 or 3 or 4 pieces, then none of the holes line up and the virus cannot get through. You understand? So you have layers of Swiss cheese, so the virus cannot get through after you add several layers.
Okay.
The trick is, it doesn't really matter which layers you use, so long as you use enough. So Korea, for example, very early on, used testing and masking.
Yeah, we did
and
it.
that was great.
What about getting vaccinated?
So vaccinated is good but not perfect. Yes, they're very effective. They have 93% effectiveness, but they're not perfect. And this
Okay.
is why, although we have this incredibly good layer of Swiss cheese with very few holes, very small holes, very good layer, it still has some holes in it. So we need another layer of defense. And this is why during vaccination, for a while, we're still going to wear masks or have gathering bans and so on. The worst thing that could happen to us would be new variants that evade the vaccine. Now, so far, the variants partially evade the vaccine to a small extent, but not to a big extent. If variants of the virus emerge that fully evade the vaccine, then we will be right back to where we were at the beginning. It'll be like a new germ that we have to cope with. Now, the pharmaceutical companies are racing to prepare boosters that are specific to the new variants. But there's another kind of booster, which is newly formulated vaccines against these specific variants that emerge. Eventually, it'll be like the flu, where you have to get a vaccine every year, or like tetanus, where you get a vaccine every 5 or 10 years. Coronavirus will be like that. You'll get a vaccine every so often. I need to stress that it's very important to understand that what we're facing right now could have been so much worse. I mean, there's no God-given reason that this virus only kills 1% of the people that it infects. It could have killed, that's a property of the virus. The virus could have arisen in Wuhan and killed 10% or 30%.
No.
Yes, I mean, it could have.
Oh, it's disaster then. Oh,
I know. But MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, which is another coronavirus, which affects people in the Middle East, it has a very low R naught, so it's not very transmissible. Only about 10,000 people have gotten this. Kills 30% of the people that it infects. So the coronaviruses, there are coronaviruses which are very deadly, and this one could have been one of those. And if it had been, it would have been like in the movie Contagion, which is a wonderful movie, by the way.
I saw that. I saw that. It's so scary. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the movie Contagion, 30% of the people who get infected die. So imagine if we had SARS-CoV-2, instead of killing 1%, killed 30% of the people that it infected. So we need, on the one hand, we're unlucky that the virus, that we have to face this plague. On the other hand, it could have been so much worse. And this is the reason why many countries, United States, Korea, and others, rightly see pandemic disease as a national security threat, and why they prepare, and why we need to continue to prepare and be vigilant. Because the next pandemic, whenever it comes, could be worse.
Wow, that's great. That's really great. Yeah. So, yeah, I have many questions from my subscribers, from my viewers. The most frequently asked question was, when will COVID end? How will we know it's over? Will it be
Yeah,
mask
like-
free? Yeah.
So I think we're going to reach the biological end will be in 2022. So we're going to reach herd immunity, either because people will naturally be infected. So herd immunity is the idea that a population can be immune, even if not every individual within the population is immune. We have to vaccinate almost everyone in order to get to herd immunity. So here's the thing. Humans have two choices.
Okay.
Either you will get vaccinated and acquire immunity that way, or you will get infected. There are very few people. There are very few people.
It's very simple.
They're very simple. Those are the choices. So there are very few people that, maybe some hermits that live in a mountain, some monks in a temple that don't interact with anybody, maybe they'll avoid it. But everyone else is either going to get infected or they're going to get the vaccine. And to be clear, it's much better to get the vaccine. I mean, it's much deadlier to get the germ to get the vaccine. So you should be vaccinated. And when we get to that point, the epidemic will stop. And just to be clear, the virus will still be present. We won't have eradicated the virus. It will still circulate and kill some people. It's just the number of people will come way down and the cases won't be growing. That is the biological end of the virus.
Okay.
I think that'll happen sometime in 2022, unless there's some very major mutations in the virus that make it much worse. So sometime in 2022 will be the biological end. But as I said earlier, and as I discussed in Apollo Zero, then we're going to have to cope with the clinical, social, psychological, and economic aftershocks. It's like a tsunami. When the water recedes, it's not like everything is fine, right? I mean, look how long it took the Japanese to recover, look at the Fukushima disaster. It takes time to recover from the shock of the virus. Also, I should say, the virus kills about 1% of the people that it infects, but it'll probably give serious disability to about 5% of the people. They'll have neurological problems or cardiac problems or pulmonary problems or kidney problems. And those people will need medical care. So all of that's going to take time, in other words.
Okay.
And I think that will end in around 2024 or so. If you're under 22 or 24, you have a 1 in 10,000 chance of dying if you get the virus. And then it goes up and up till you get to my age. When you're in your late 50s, it's about 1%. And then when you get to be in your 70s or 80s, it's about 10 or 20%. So it has this shape. But the Delta variant is steeper. In other words, young people are more likely to die. If you're infected, if you're 30 and you get infected with Delta, you're much more likely to die than if you're 30 and you get infected with the original Wuhan strain. Now, hundreds of millions of people have been injected with these other vaccines, the mRNA vaccines and the adenovirus vaccines that are available. I don't know about the Sinovac and the Sinopharm vaccines. The data there is a little more, or the Sputnik vaccine, the data there is a little bit more fuzzy. But for the AstraZeneca, the Johnson & Johnson, the Novartis vaccines, and the two mRNA vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer, we now have very good evidence about safety and efficacy. You have to decide, do you want to have the virus or do you want to have the vaccine? And in my mind, it's so much safer and wiser to get the vaccine.
You mentioned us and them in your book. If the pathogen does not discriminate, why should we? This quote is very impressive to me. So I guess it'll probably take time for the discrimination to end, even after the pandemic. It's been heartbreaking to hear stories about Asian Americans, for example, targeted for hate crimes. What does the future hold for this device?
Well, first of all, I think it's important there have been some episodes of Asian Americans targeted because people think, oh, well, they must be infected or they caused the virus or something like that. This is, as you said, this desire to blame others is typical of plague.
Oh, during the pandemic.
Yeah, during the medieval times, for example, they wanted to blame the Jews. Like hundreds, thousands of Jews were buried alive because they thought that they had caused the bubonic plague. Or during AIDS, people wanted to blame gay people or people from Haiti. Right? Because always blame someone else. So the desire to blame others during times of plague is typical. And we are seeing that in the United States and other countries around the world again now. But as I say in the book, and as you noted, it's very important to resist this temptation because it's not other people that are doing this to us. It's the virus that's doing this to us. And so I think it's very important to try to push back against this temptation to blame others.
Yeah, right. That's a big problem. Okay, you said in your book, humans have evolved every time we've been through a major pandemic or a major plague. Could you tell us what kind of evolution we are going to go through this time around?
Well, there are two kinds of, there's this kind of social change. In other words, to what extent will some of the changes that we've seen because of the pandemic, to what extent will they endure? Will people continue to work from home, or what kind of new technologies? Zoom technology will become much more used by more people, and so on. There are those kind of changes versus evolution in the sense that I use the term usually, which is how the virus evolves or how our species evolves. Over thousands of years, our species has evolved genetically to cope with these types of threats. And there's a lot of evidence, and I discuss some of this in the book, that most of the germs that affect us are germs that were previously present in our domesticated animals. So if your question is about the evolution of us, the answer is that happens, but not over short time periods. That's over 1,000-year time horizons. And if your question is about the evolution in our societies, how we evolved to be different, then yes, we are seeing those changes. We're going to see a change in the healthcare industry, in the education industry, in the robotics industry, in the retailing industry. There are going to be many changes in different industries forced by this particular pandemic.
Thank you very much. Your book, the last question, this is the last question. Your book is so timely. There has been no book quite like it. It's extremely insightful, especially because it's backed by science and history and gives us an accurate look into the COVID situation. I also find it philosophical and comforting. What do you wish for your readers to take away from it?
I think what I would like the listeners to take away from it is not just some hope. I think it's a true, well-founded hope, based on an understanding of our species, based on an understanding of the epidemiology of the germ, based on an understanding of our previous response to plagues. I know we will see the other side of this, and life will go on.
Okay, right. It's very hopeful, Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and good luck to everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. 자, 여러분, 이 책 나눔 이벤트를 하겠습니다. 정말 너무 좋은 책인데요. 이 책을 여러분과 같이 나누고 싶은데 뭘로 할까 하다가 일단 이 책 제목을 좀 적어주세요. 그리고 더불어서 지금 보신 이 영상 어때요? 이렇게 좀 속 시원하게 통쾌하게 얘기해 주시지 않습니까? 닥터 크리스타키스 이름 발음이 어렵습니다. 닥터 크리스타키스의 이 영상을 보시고 저와 인터뷰한 걸 보시고 여러분 후기를 좀 적어주세요. 이 영상 보고 뭘 느꼈다라는 걸 좀 적어주시면 여러분 적어주신 분 중에 10분을 추첨해서 이 책을 보내드리도록 하겠습니다. 오늘의 북요약본을 받고 싶으시다면 이곳을 클릭하세요.